Welcome. It is great to be with fellow Texans. Rad, thank you for the very kind words. Exactly as Ashley wrote them for you. You did a fabulous job with that. And thank you for your great friendship and leadership in San Antonio and in Texas and in the business community. You know, there's an ancient Chinese curse. May you live in interesting times. These are nothing if not interesting times. Washington right now, this is a time of incredible change. This is a time of a great deal of action in this city. And anytime there's change, there's risk. But I got to tell you, I am filled with excitement at the opportunity we have. We have an opportunity to do something extraordinary. We have an opportunity to do an enormous amount of good. Now, we could always screw it up. That's something Washington is very, very good at doing. The administration could, Congress could. But Republicans have been given something that is rare and historic. It is not often in history that Republicans are given control of the White House, of every executive agency, and of both houses of Congress. And at this point, the time for talk is over. There aren't any excuses. We've got to deliver. Now, what's that going to mean? What's that going to mean over the next year, 2 years, 4 years? Well, I can tell you my number one priority in the Senate, and this has been true from the day I was elected, is jobs and economic growth. I know that is the top priority for the men and women gathered here. It's the top priority for the citizens of San Antonio and for Texans all across the state. Wherever you go in Texas, jobs and economic growth is the number one focus because every other problem we've got derives from that. If you want to pay down our national debt, if you want to rebuild our military and keep this country safe, if you want to strengthen and preserve Social Security and Medicare, all of that depends on growth. If we've got the economy growing and booming and more jobs being created and wages going up, we've got the resources to address all those other problems. And if we don't, if we're stuck in economic stagnation, then those problems are almost insolvable. And when it comes to economic growth, you know, one of the great things about Texas is Texans understand where jobs come from, that it's you guys that produce jobs. It's not government. It's none of the politicians who walked onto this stage. None of us produce jobs. It's the men and women sitting here, those in the private sector, putting capital at work to meet a need that create jobs. But government is really good at screwing it up. And the two best levers that government has to encourage job creation are reg reform and tax reform. What Texans understand is that when you get government out of the way, when you create an environment with limited taxes, limited regulations, when you unchain small business owners, the result is incredible prosperity. That's the Texas ethos. I like to say Texas is the basic ethos of our state is give me a horse and a gun and an open field and I can challenge the world. I like to call Texas America on steroids. And I will say on both of those, reg reform and tax reform, I'm very optimistic. Reg reform is probably the single thing I am most optimistic about with the new administration. I've sat down now with most of the new cabinet members or nominees, and almost to a person, every single member of the cabinet I've visited with, the first words out of their mouth are reg reform, are lifting the burdens of Washington on small businesses and job creators. And as I travel Texas all over the state, I hear that over and over and over again from small businesses. The federal regulations are hammering us, the energy industry. Obviously hugely critical to the future of Texas, the future of our country. I think there is an enthusiasm and optimism in the energy industry I haven't seen in a long, long time. An understanding that we're not going to have a federal government putting regs in the way, trying to crush the industry, trying to destroy jobs, trying to prevent us from developing our resources. San Antonio and South Texas, you look at the Eagle Ford, the incredible prosperity and abundance that has come from that. And Texas is now leading the world in energy production. But I believe over the next 4 years, we're going to have a federal government that seeks to advance that, to further our ability to develop energy, to create jobs, to raise wages, rather than putting in place barriers. You look at health care, a huge part of our economy. You know, last week I had the opportunity to participate in a debate on CNN with Bernie Sanders over health care. It's 2 hours. All on Obamacare and health care. I've got to say, it was, I think, more substance than we may have had the entire presidential debate cycle. It was 2 hours on one very, very important topic rather than a 60-second or 90-second soundbite, which is what you so often get in politics. You get a talking point, you get a bumper sticker, and move on to the next topic. And some of these problems, a lot of these problems are hard, they're complicated, and we need to actually drill down and understand what's going on. When it comes to Obamacare, Texans, it is the single biggest thing I hear from Texas small business owners. My time in the Senate, one of the things that I've done all over the state is hosted small business roundtables. I try to do that all over the place, invite 10, 20, 30 small business owners in a community to come sit at a table. And just to talk about what challenges are facing you. I try to spend my time listening rather than talking at those round tables and just opening it up, saying, let's talk about anything you want. What are the concerns? What is keeping you up at night? What are you praying about? What are you worried about? Every single small business roundtable I've done in Texas, the number one concern raised around the table has been Obamacare. Over and over and over again. For those of you who watched the Bernie Sanders debate, that was typified by a woman from Fort Worth who stood up. She stood up and explained she was a small business owner, that she owned several hairstyling salons, that she had, I believe, 48 employees, and she couldn't expand beyond that because Obamacare kicks in at 50. And she asked Bernie Sanders, what am I supposed to do about it? And I would encourage you, by the way, if you haven't seen that exchange, watch that exchange. I think that exchange was the most important exchange of the evening because Bernie's answer was, you're not going to like my answer. My answer is you need to pay for health insurance for everyone that's working for you. And she said, look, in the hairstyling business, our margins are tiny. If I do that, I go bankrupt. And Bernie's answer again was, well, you know, I don't know much about hair salons or small business or any of that stuff. But you've got health insurance and your employees need it too. And this woman stood up and said, I don't have health insurance. I can't afford it for me either. That's a message I've heard echoed over and over and over again. All across Texas, there are millions of what are called 49ers, small businesses that are stuck at 48, 49 employees because crossing the 50-employee threshold will put them out of business. There are millions of 29ers, employees that are stuck at 29 hours a week because crossing the threshold to 30 subjects their business to Obamacare. You know, the night after that debate, I was having dinner here in D.C., and two waitresses came up to the table. Two waitresses I know well. It's a place I have dinner a lot. They came up and they both said, you know, I watched the debate last night with Bernie. One of them said, in the last 3 years, my health insurance has tripled. Used to be $400 a month, now it's $1,200 a month. And she said, you know what, for the first time in my life, I don't have health insurance. I can't afford $1,200 a month. And she said also, for the first time ever, this restaurant where she's worked over a decade moved her to under 30 hours a week. She said they calculated her preceding year and she worked 29.99 hours a week and has no health insurance. And the other waitress who was standing there, she told me, she said, well, you know, Ted, I'm 4 months pregnant. She looks fabulous. You can't tell she's pregnant at all. She's not showing it all. But she says, I'm 4 months pregnant. It's our first baby. We're really excited. She said, I just got a notification in the mail that I can't go to my doctor. The doctor that I've trusted on and relied upon, the doctor that I want to deliver this baby, my insurance that I've got says, sorry, that doctor's not in your network. You don't get to go to that doctor to deliver your baby. Obamacare isn't working, and in terms of what's going to be delivered, I think there is no problem that was more central to the American people in this last election then finally repealing Obamacare. Congress has taken it up right now. And in terms of what we're going to accomplish, here's the lay of the land in the Senate right now. Right now in the Senate, Senate Democrats are filibustering virtually everything. They're angry. They're angry at the election. They're angry at the results. And they're boycotting committee hearings. It may prove very, very difficult to get any legislation passed the next year or the next 2 years. If Democrats continue filibustering, we're not going to see legislation passing. Which means what's critically important if you're interested in actually accomplishing meaningful reforms to get our economy back is asking, all right, what tools are there that can't be filibustered? And there are three primary areas that are not subject to the filibuster. The first one is confirmations. You look at the cabinet, you'll recall 2 years ago, Harry Reid used what was called the nuclear option, blew up the Senate rules and lowered the threshold for executive confirmations from 60 votes to 51 votes. As a result of that, President Trump's cabinet nominees, I think they have been confirmed over and over and over again. Now, this is the slowest confirmation since George Washington. That the Democrats are able to delay it a few days or a few weeks, but at the end of the day, that's a 51 vote threshold. And the cabinet we've seen nominated is a strong, serious cabinet. You've got Texans, people like Rex Tillerson, people like Rick Perry serving in the cabinet, both of whom I think are going to do extraordinary jobs. You've got someone like Scott Pruitt at EPA, who was the Attorney General of Oklahoma, as someone who is not going to have EPA be zealots going after small businesses trying to kill jobs, but instead focus that organization on keeping the air clean and the water clean and protecting us, but not destroying people's jobs. When it comes to confirmations, we're going to confirm these nominees. We're also, by the way, going to confirm Neil Gorsuch, a strong, principled constitutionalist jurist, to replace Antonin Scalia on the Supreme Court. The second avenue that we can act with only 51 votes is what's called the Congressional Review Act, the CRA. That's a special bill that lets Congress rescind any regulation that was promulgated in the last 6 months of last year. There is a lot of appetite in both houses of Congress to use the CRA to wind back some of these most damaging regulations. What I would encourage you guys to do, every one of you in your businesses, you're facing regulations, you're facing barriers, reach out to our office. Let us know which regulations are most burdensome, are hurting your business the most, which regulations, if repealed, would have the biggest impact on your bottom line, on productivity, on job creation, on wages and salaries. Because under the terms of the law, the Congressional Review Act can rescind those regs, and the Democrats cannot filibuster it. That's only 51 votes. We're going to be seeing a lot of CRA repeals of regulations. And I think that will coincide with the administration on the executive side unwinding some of the most damaging regulations that are not subject to the CRA, that didn't come out in the last 6 months of last year, but were promulgated over the last 8 years. And then the third area is what's called budget reconciliation. Now, you may have heard some discussion of budget reconciliation, but that's a fairly obscure procedural term. Budget reconciliation is the statutory process for passing a budget. The reason it matters when it comes to legislating is under the terms of the statute, reconciliation only requires 51 votes and not 60. So it is a tool to get around a filibuster on the other side. You remember when George W. Bush was president, the Bush tax cuts were passed through budget reconciliation. Obamacare, when it was originally passed, much of Obamacare was passed through budget reconciliation. We're doing reconciliation right now. We're in the middle of it right now. Reconciliation is envisioned as the vehicle for Obamacare repeal. We're going to repeal Obamacare, and then everyone agrees we should replace it with patient-centered reforms that empower you, that put you in charge of your health care, so you're making decisions for your family in consultation with your doctor without government getting in the way. We should be doing things like allowing people to buy health insurance across state lines, which expands competitions, increases choices, lower prices. We should be expanding health savings accounts. We should be reforming the tax laws to make health insurance portable so that if someone loses their health insurance, loses their job rather, they don't lose their health insurance. It goes with them from job to job to job, and it's personal and portable and affordable. Reconciliation right now is the legislative vehicle for doing that, and as long as we do it on reconciliation, it can't be filibustered. And then the intention is later this year, this summer or fall, to do a second reconciliation. And this second reconciliation is intended to be principally the vehicle for tax reform. When I started at the outset talking about the two levers government has, reg reform and tax reform, I think we're going to finish 2017 having passed meaningful tax reform. I think the second reconciliation this year, tax reform and also Dodd-Frank, which has been killing jobs, imposing massive burdens. I think we should take on Dodd-Frank as well in the second reconciliation. But tax reform, at this point, I am not sure the contours of what will pass. I believe we will end 2017 with significant tax reform, and here's my hope. My hope is we go bigger and bolder rather than small. That we use this as an opportunity to pass really meaningful tax reform. What I would like to see is tax simplification. What I'd like to see is a simple flat tax where every individual and family pays a simple flat tax of 10%. You fill out your taxes on a postcard and you abolish the IRS. IRS doesn't get a lot of fans around here. And what I'd like to see is a simple business flat tax of 16%. And with those two taxes, you can get rid of every other tax. You can get rid of the corporate income tax. You can get rid of the payroll tax. You can dramatically simplify the time, the energy, the money that you're putting into tax compliance. And tax reform, every time we have passed tax reform that simplified the tax code, that reduces the burdens on small businesses, the result consistently is booming economic growth. So this year, I think we have a real potential to repeal Obamacare, to pass meaningful reg reform, to pass meaningful tax reform, and to confirm a strong constitutionalist successor to Justice Scalia. If we deliver on that, that will make one heck of an opening year. Now, every one of those, as I said, we could mess up, but what I'm urging folks to do is let's do what we said we would do. Let's deliver on our promises. And I just want to thank you guys for leading the business community in and around San Antonio and for standing up and fighting for the free enterprise principles that have made America great and have made Texas great. I think we need to get back to those common sense Texas principles, and I'm encouraged that's exactly what we're going to do.